What's up, you freaking geniuses? So in this video, I'm going to teach you how to solve composite functions. All right, so we're going to go over a few a little more difficult examples. I'm going to cover some square roots, some fractions, and even a little bit of factoring. All right, so let's start with this first example right here. So we have f of x is equal to x squared, and g of x is equal to x minus 1, right? And we want to find two different compositions. So first we want to find, I know it looks like it says fog, but here it really says f of g of x. And then we also want to find the reverse, g of f of x, okay? So let's start with this, the fog, the f of g of x. Now, f of g of x just means we want to plug in g of x wherever we have an x, all right? So we want to plug in a g of x, or well, we did plug in a g of x right here for x already, right? So that just means we want to plug in g of x wherever we have an x in our function. So this is the only x in the function right here, so we're going to plug in a g of x right here for this x, all right? So here f of g of x is going to be equal to, and then again we're going to plug in g of x right there for this x right here, and we can just put that in parentheses. And then you can see we still have this squared exponent on the outside, so we're still going to have this squared exponent on the outside, all right? So then here, this is going to be equal to, well, what is g of x? G of x, as you can see, is x minus 1. So we're going to plug in x minus 1 right here for g of x. So in parentheses, let's plug in x minus 1, and again, that's squared, right? So then here, we just have to solve this right here, x minus 1 squared. So let's multiply that out. So then, again, this is going to be equal to x minus 1 times x minus 1. So then here we can FOIL, right? So x times x is x squared, x times negative 1 is negative x, and then negative 1 times x is again negative x. Negative 1 times negative 1 is positive 1. So here, combining like terms, we finally get x squared minus 2x plus 1. All right, we can't simplify this quadratic anymore, so this would be our final answer. Now, let's go to finding g of f of x. All right, so this time we want to do the other way around. All right, so here, this just means we want to plug in f of x wherever we have an x, right? So this is the only spot we have an x, so that means this is where we want to plug in f of x. And what is f of x? Well, f of x is equal to x squared. So we simply want to plug in an x squared right here for this x, all right? So then here, g of f of x is going to be equal to x minus 1, but again, remember, we're going to plug in x squared for this x right here, right? So we're going to have x squared minus 1, all right? This is already as simplified as we can write it, so here, this would be our final answer. All right, here's the next example we're going to do. All right, so here the first one is f of x is equal to 3x, and g of x is equal to x to the 4th, right? So again, let's just start by finding f of g of x, right? This first one right here. So again, that just means we're going to plug in g of x wherever we see an x. So the only x we see here is this x. So we're going to plug in g of x right here. And what is g of x? Well, g of x is x to the 4th, right? So we're going to plug in x to the 4th right here for this x, okay? So here, f of g of x is going to be equal to 3 times x, but again, we're going to plug in that x to the 4th right there. Now here, this is already as simplified as we can write it, luckily, so this would be our final answer, all right? Now, let's go on to finding g of f of x. So here we want to plug in f of x wherever we see an x, right? So the only x we see here is this x right here, so we're going to plug in an f of x right here. But again, what is f of x? Well, f of x is 3x, right? So we're going to plug in a 3x right here. Okay, so g of f of x is going to be equal to 3x, so let's plug that in for x, and I'm going to put it in parentheses, because as you can see, we still have this 4th power out here, right? So let's raise this whole thing to the 4th power. Now, in order to simplify this, the way you apply this exponent is you have to apply it to everything that's in the parentheses. So we have to apply it to the 3 and to the x, all right? So then here, this is going to be equal to, in parentheses again, 3 raised to the 4th times x raised to the 4th, all right? So 3 to the 4th is equal to 81, and then we just have our x to the fourth right there. All right, that's as simplified as we can write it, so that's our final answer. All right, now let's do one with a square root. So here we have f of x is equal to the square root of x minus 1, and g of x is equal to x squared plus 1. All right, so let's start with, again, finding f of g of x. All right, so again, we want to just plug in g of x wherever we have an x. So the only x we have here is this guy right here. So this is where we're going to plug in g of x, and g of x, as you can see, is x squared plus 1, right? So we're going to plug in x squared plus 1 right here for this x, right? So then here, f of g of x is going to be equal to the square root of x squared plus 1, and then we have this minus 1 right here, okay? It made this way too long. It's way too long, way too long. That's what she said? I'm not sure. So here, now we can simplify this a little bit, right? So as you can see under this square root, under the radical, we have x squared plus 1 minus 1. So plus 1 minus 1, that obviously just cancels out. So here, f of g of x is going to be equal to simply what we're left with, which is x squared, all right? So x squared. Now here we're simply taking the square root of a squared exponent. So that means those cancel out, and we're just left with whatever's inside of the radical, which is just this x, right? So then here, this is simply equal to x, all right? This is our final answer. All right, now let's find g of f of x. Again, we're just going to plug in f of x wherever we see an x. So the only x is this one right here. And so again, yeah, we're plugging in f of x, and f of x, as you can see, is the square root of x minus 1, right? So we're going to plug in the square root of x minus 1 for this x, all right? So then here we can see that g of f of x is going to be equal to, again, plugging this in for x, right? The square root of x minus 1. And then I'm going to put that in parentheses because, as you can see, we still have this squared exponent out here, right? So we still have to apply that right there. And then we have our plus 1. Now here, as you can see, we're squaring a square root, which incidentally also kill each other. Okay, so the square root and the squared exponent cancel each other out, and all we're going to be left with is whatever was inside of that square root, so x minus 1. So here this is going to be equal to x minus 1, and then we still have our plus 1 out here, right? So here, this minus 1 plus 1 kill each other, so we're simply left with, again, just, if I can get my colors right, x. Boom. All right, lastly, let's try one with a fraction. So here, f of x is equal to x cubed, and g of x is equal to 1 over x. All right, so again, let's just start with finding f of g of x. All right, so let's plug in g of x wherever we see an x, right? So this is the only spot where we're going to plug in g of x, and g of x is 1 over x. All right, so we're going to plug in a 1 over x right here. So f of g of x is going to be equal to, plugging that in, right, 1 over x, and then we're going to put this in parentheses because, as you can see, we're applying an exponent to it, right, this big ass 3. All right, the way that you apply an exponent to a fraction is you have to apply that exponent to the top and to the bottom, all right? So then here, this is going to be equal to 1 raised to the third power over x, also raised to the third power, right? So then here, let's simplify this. 1 raised to the third power is equal to simply 1, and x cubed simply stays as x cubed, all right? That's as simplified as we can write it, so this is our final answer. All right, now lastly, let's find g of f of x. All right, so again, we're going to plug in an f of x wherever we see an x, and the only x we see is right here in the denominator, right? And f of x, don't forget, is x cubed, right? So we're going to plug in x cubed right here for this x. So g of f of x is going to be equal to 1 over, and then plugging that in, we're going to get x cubed. That's as simple as we can write this. So this is our final answer. Boom. So if you found the video helpful, make sure to leave a thumbs up down below. And if you have any questions, let me know in the comments section below.